I'm so glad you found your way here. Every single night, your brain constructs entire worlds from memory fragments, emotions, and pure imagination. And sometimes, it lets you know it's doing it. You'll discover where dreams are born and understand why the sleeping mind might be the most creative thing in the universe. Welcome to Sleepy Science Facts. Wherever you are right now, perhaps in the quiet dark of your room, your body already beginning to loosen and slow, allow yourself this gentle drift. We'll journey through 100 dream science facts about the sleeping mind. From the first moments of falling asleep and the strange images that arrive at the threshold, to the architecture of REM sleep, to the rare and extraordinary world of lucid dreaming. This thoughtful journey through dream science builds bridges between searching minds. A gentle subscribe, like, or quiet share creates a pathway for more dream explorers to find their way here, and brings us closer to protecting this peaceful space, one sleepy soul at a time. Your presence here matters more than you know. Let yourself settle completely here. Feel your jaw unclench, your breathing deepen and slow. There's nothing you need to hold on to tonight. Simply sense that soft, dreamy heaviness moving through you, like your thoughts are gently dissolving at the edges, like the first images of a dream already forming in the quiet behind your eyes. Close your eyes and breathe deeply. You're floating where the waking world and the dreaming world have no clear boundary. Let your mind soften into the space between. And now we begin. Every human being dreams. This is one of the most consistent findings in sleep science. Whether people remember their dreams or not, studies using brain imaging and sleep monitoring have confirmed that dreaming occurs across virtually all healthy adults and has been observed in children and in many animals as well. The brain does not go quiet during sleep. It goes somewhere else entirely. And the journey it takes each night is, in its own way, as complex and vivid as anything experienced in waking life. We simply do not always bring back a clear record of where we have been. Dreaming is not optional. It is, in some deep sense, what the sleeping brain does. Dreams happen primarily during a specific stage of sleep called REM sleep, which stands for Rapid Eye Movement Sleep. During this stage, the eyes move back and forth beneath closed eyelids, and the brain produces electrical activity that looks remarkably similar to waking consciousness on an EEG machine. The body, however, remains almost completely still. Muscles lose their ability to move in a process called atonia, a kind of protective paralysis that prevents the body from acting out the events of the dream. REM sleep was first identified in the early 1950s by researchers at the University of Chicago, and its discovery transformed the scientific understanding of sleep from a passive resting state into an active, purposeful process of mental work. A typical night of sleep is not a single, continuous state. The brain cycles through several distinct stages, repeating roughly every 90 minutes. These cycles begin with lighter NREM sleep, then drift into deeper slow-wave sleep, and then arrive at REM. Over the course of a full 8-hour night, a person will complete approximately 4 to 6 of these cycles. The proportion of time spent in REM REM increases with each cycle, which means the longer you sleep, the more dream time you accumulate. The final hours of the night, the hours that people most often cut short, contain the richest, most vivid dreaming. Those last dreams before waking are not indulgences. They are, in some ways, the most important part of the night. The first REM period of the night is brief, typically around 10 minutes. But by the fourth or fifth cycle, a single REM period can extend to nearly an hour. This progression is not random. It follows a biological rhythm shaped by millions of years of evolution. Though scientists are still working to understand precisely why the architecture of sleep is organized this way, what is clear is that the brain reserves its deepest and most elaborate dream states for the end of the night, as if it is building towards something, working its way gradually into the most complex forms of internal experience it can produce. There is a patience to the sleeping brain that the waking mind rarely allows itself. Even before reaching REM sleep, the brain enters a twilight state at the very edge of consciousness. This is called the hypnagogic state, the transitional zone between waking and sleeping, when awareness begins to soften and the first fleeting images appear. Most people have felt this without knowing its name. A sudden visual flash just before sleep, the sensation of falling and then jerking awake, or the experience of hearing your own name called from somewhere that does not exist. These hypnagogic experiences are not quite dreams, are not quite waking thoughts. They occupy a liminal space that neuroscientists are still exploring, a doorway that the brain passes through every single night, usually without pausing. Thomas Edison reportedly used the hypnagogic state deliberately. He would sit in a chair holding steel balls in his hands while he dozed. The moment he fell deeply enough asleep, the balls would drop, the noise would wake him, and he would capture whatever images or ideas had appeared at the threshold of sleep. Whether or not this story is fully accurate, the underlying principle is scientifically sound. Research has confirmed that creative insights and unusual associative connections occur with particular frequency during hypnagogia. The brain in that liminal state is loose enough to make connections it would never make while fully awake, and structured enough to still hold them in memory for a moment. Dreams can occur during non-REM sleep as well, a fact that surprised researchers who originally assumed dreaming was exclusively a REM phenomenon. When people are awakened from deep NREM stages and asked what was happening in their minds, roughly half report experiencing some form of mental content. These NREM dreams tend to be shorter, more realistic, and less emotionally intense than REM dreams. They often resemble thoughts more than stories, a lingering image, a quiet repetition of something from the day. The distinction between REM and NREM dreaming is real, but it is not absolute. It appears that the dreaming brain is always active to some degree, and the stage of sleep shapes the quality, not the presence, of inner experience. The content of dreams is surprisingly consistent across cultures and across centuries. Studies examining dream reports from populations around the world have found that certain themes appear with remarkable regularity: being chased or threatened, falling from a height, flying, arriving unprepared for a test or performance, teeth falling out, and appearing in public without clothing. These recurring themes suggest that dreaming taps into something very old in the human brain. Universal anxieties and longings that have been part of our species' inner life for far longer than any civilization. The specifics change with culture and time. The underlying structures do not. Despite the universal prevalence of dreaming, most people forget nearly all of their dreams. Research suggests that the average person forgets approximately 95% of what they dream within minutes of waking. This rapid forgetting appears to be related to changes in neurochemistry during sleep. In REM, sleep, the brain produces very little norepinephrine, a chemical involved in attention and memory consolidation. Without it, dream memories fade almost immediately upon waking, like writing in water. The fact that dreams leave so little trace in memory is not a flaw in the system. It may be a feature, the brain clearing space each morning for new experience. Dream recall can be improved. People who keep a dream journal and write down whatever fragments they remember immediately upon waking tend to develop better dream memory over time. Researchers believe this is because the act of recording dreams trains the brain to maintain the transition from sleep to waking more gently, giving the hippocampus, the brain's memory-forming structure, a brief window to consolidate the dream before it dissolves. Those who wake to loud alarms immediately pick up their phones or jump into the day tend to have the lowest dream recall. The pace of the waking moment matters enormously to what carries through from the night. The brain is extraordinarily active during REM sleep, in some ways more active than during waking. Blood flow to the visual cortex increases dramatically. The limbic system, which governs emotion, is highly engaged. The prefrontal cortex, which handles rational judgment and self-monitoring, is largely quieted. This pattern of activation helps explain why REM dreams feel so vivid and emotionally real, and why they are so often bizarre and illogical. The brain is running its most emotional, most visual systems at full power, while the part that normally moderates and questions is resting. In a dream, almost anything is possible, not because the rules are broken, but because the inner referee has stepped quietly away. The average person spends approximately 2 hours in REM sleep each night, over a lifetime of 75 years. This adds up to roughly 6 years spent dreaming. That is 6 years of full sensory immersion in worlds that exist only inside the mind. 6 years of conversations, landscapes, emotions, and events that leave almost no trace and produce no artifacts, no evidence, no permanent record. They happen and they dissolve. And yet science increasingly suggests they are not wasted time. Something essential is occurring during those 6 years that the waking mind cannot accomplish on its own. REM, sleep, appears to play a particular role in emotional processing. During this stage, the brain seems to revisit emotionally charged memories and gradually reduce the emotional intensity attached to them. A kind of overnight recalibration. Research suggests that the neurochemical environment of REM sleep, which is low in the stress-related chemical norepinephrine, creates a safe context for the brain to re-examine difficult experiences without the full weight of their original emotional charge. Some sleep researchers have described this process as a form of emotional first aid, a nightly softening of the day's sharpest experiences. Sleep does not erase pain, but it can take its sting out. The memories that appear in dreams are not random selections. Research has identified a pattern called the day residue. Events from the past 24 hours that are most emotionally salient tend to appear in the night's first REM periods. But there is also a second window, approximately 7 days after an experience, when a related dream is more likely to occur. A rhythm sometimes called the dream lag effect. This weekly echo suggests that the brain is revisiting and categorizing experience on a longer timeline than sleep researchers initially expected. The night does not just process today. It is also quietly attending to last week. Dreams are highly visual, but they are not exclusively so. Studies have found that most dreams involve all available senses. Tactile sensation, sounds, smells, and even tastes appear with some regularity in dream reports. Interestingly, people who are blind from birth report dreams that are rich in non-visual sensory content, including sounds and physical sensations, but typically do not involve visual imagery if they lost their sight before the age of 5. Those who become blind after early childhood often retain visual dreaming for years, even decades, after losing their sight. The brain recreates the sensory world as it learned to experience it, drawing on whatever templates were laid down earliest and most completely. Some evidence suggests that animals dream as well. Studies observing the sleep of rats have found that their hippocampal neurons replay the specific patterns of activity that occurred during waking exploration, as if the rats are running through a maze again in their sleep. Birds in REM sleep show the same neural activity that occurs when they are singing their songs by day. And in classic laboratory experiments, when the mechanism controlling muscle atonia during REM sleep was experimentally altered in cats, the sleeping animals began to enact what appeared to be hunting, stalking, and defensive behaviors, fully asleep, their bodies moving through dream scenarios as if they were real. These studies provided some of the earliest evidence that the content of REM sleep in mammals may be far richer than their silence suggests. The scientific term for dream content research is oneirology, from the Greek word oneiros, meaning dream. The study of dreams as a legitimate scientific field is relatively young. For most of recorded history, dreams were understood through spiritual, religious, or symbolic frameworks. Even early psychoanalytic interpretations of dreams, published at the turn of the 20th century, were more philosophical than empirical. It was not until the discovery of REM sleep in 1953 and the subsequent development of brain imaging technology that dream science could be studied with the same tools used to study any other neurological phenomenon. We have been dreaming for millions of years. We have been studying dreams scientifically for fewer than 70. One of the most persistent questions in dream science is why we dream at all. No single theory has achieved scientific consensus, and researchers continue to propose and test competing explanations. Among the most discussed theories are these: that dreaming serves memory consolidation, helping the brain sort and store the day's experiences; that dreaming supports emotional regulation, reducing the charge of difficult feelings; that dreaming simulates threatening situations as a kind of evolutionary rehearsal for real-world dangers, and the dreaming is a byproduct of memory reactivation, a narrative the brain constructs around the fragments it is processing. Each of these theories has supporting evidence. None has proven decisive. The reason we dream remains, in honest scientific terms, an open question. One prominent theory in evolutionary neuroscience proposes that a primary function of dreaming is threat simulation, that the sleeping brain runs rehearsals of dangerous or challenging scenarios to prepare the organism to respond effectively when similar situations arise in waking life. Dreams dominated by threat and pursuit would, in this framework, be functional training rather than distressing noise. This theory predicts that dreaming should have survived evolutionary pressure, which it clearly has, and that people exposed to more real-world threats should show more threat-related dreaming. A prediction that has received some support from studies of children growing up in high-stress or conflict environments. Recurring dreams are common and may carry informational weight. Research has found that recurring dreams tend to center on unresolved conflicts, persistent anxieties, or incomplete emotional processing. They appear to repeat not because the brain is malfunctioning, but because it is returning to something it has not yet fully processed. Many therapists working in trauma-informed care now consider the content of recurring dreams as a useful window into states that their clients cannot always access in ordinary conversation. The dream says things that the waking mind does not yet have language for, and it keeps saying them, gently, night after night, until something shifts. The sense of time in dreams is distorted in ways that are still not fully understood. Within a dream, a storyline that seems to span hours or days may correspond to only a few minutes of actual REM sleep. Conversely, some dreamers report experiences of extraordinary compression, an entire life reviewed in what feels like a single, sustained moment. Whether the brain actually experiences accelerated time in dreams, or whether the retrospective narrative constructed upon waking simply feels that way, is a matter ongoing in sleep research. What is clear is that the waking clock has no authority inside a dream. Time in the dreaming mind follows its own laws entirely. The dreaming brain makes no reliable distinction between imagined events and real ones at the level of emotional response. When you are frightened in a dream, the amygdala, the brain's fear center, activates in the same way it would if you were genuinely threatened while awake. Your heart rate rises, your breathing changes, your body prepares to respond. The brain, in its deepest sleep, does not know it is performing a simulation. It simply lives the experience it is constructing. This is why nightmares leave people trembling and upset for minutes after waking, and why particularly vivid, positive dreams can leave a soft warmth that lingers throughout the morning. Children dream more than adults. Newborns spend approximately half of their total sleep time in a state that resembles REM sleep, sometimes called active sleep, a proportion that gradually decreases as the brain matures through childhood and into adulthood. Some sleep researchers have proposed that this extended early life active sleep plays a role in brain development, that the sleeping infant brain is not simply resting, but actively building and organizing its neural architecture. By the time a person reaches adulthood, REM sleep typically constitutes around 20 to 25% of total sleep time. The brain's appetite for dreaming is greatest when it has the most to learn. The eyes really do move in REM sleep. The rapid eye movements that give the stage its name. And researchers have speculated about what those movements represent. One early theory proposed that the eyes follow the visual action of the dream, as if watching a private film. Some evidence supports this. In studies where people were asked to do specific actions in a lucid dream, looking left and right a fixed number of times, and then performed those actions while dreaming, the corresponding eye movements were recorded on the monitoring equipment. The eye, it seems, is at least partially tracking where the dreaming mind is looking. The body, even in its most still state, is not fully absent from the story. There is a documented phenomenon in which dreamers become partially aware that they are dreaming without crossing into full lucidity. In these pre-lucid states, the dreamer may notice something strange or inconsistent. A room that shifts. A person who transforms. A gravity that does not work as expected. And then rationalize it away, rather than recognizing it as a dream signal. The dreamer might think, "This is strange, but I suppose it could happen." The moment of full lucidity, the moment of saying, "This is a dream," is, in some ways, one of the simplest acts of metacognition that a human being can perform. But arriving at it, from inside the dream, takes a particular kind of mental stepping back. And that stepping back is the beginning of everything. Let's pause here and notice what is happening inside you. Right now, every cell in your body knows how to sleep. This state, this softening, this gradual release, has been repeated millions of times before you were born. Your ancestors slept. Their ancestors slept. Through ice ages and migrations and long nights without language to name what the dark contained. The sleeping brain has been doing this very thing. You are doing the oldest thing a human body knows how to do. Your breathing is slower now. Your muscles are releasing their hold. Somewhere in the architecture of your mind, the first structures of the night are quietly taking shape. You don't have to do anything. You are already on your way. Now we continue. Lucid dreaming is the experience of becoming consciously aware that you are dreaming while the dream continues. In a lucid dream, the sleeper knows that the world around them is a construction of the mind, and sometimes they are able to influence or direct what happens within it. The word lucid does not only mean vivid or clear. It comes from the Latin lucidus, meaning light or illuminated, a state of inner light within the darkness of sleep. The phenomenon has been documented for at least 2,000 years. Aristotle referenced it. Tibetan Buddhist practitioners have cultivated it intentionally for centuries. And since the late 1970s, science has been able to confirm it objectively and study it in a laboratory. The first laboratory evidence of lucid dreaming arrived in 1975, when British researcher Keith Hearn recorded something no scientist had captured before: a pre-arranged sequence of eye movements made by a sleeping person in the middle of a dream, signaling consciously from within REM sleep. A few years later, researcher Stephen LaBerge independently replicated this work at Stanford University, publishing results in peer-reviewed scientific journals that brought the phenomenon to the attention of the broader research community. Together, their work transformed lucid dreaming from personal accounts and ancient reports into a measurable, verifiable brain state, and opened the door to all the research that has followed. Lucid dreaming is not particularly common. Research estimates that roughly 55% of people have had at least one lucid dream at some point in their lives. But regular lucid dreaming, occurring once a month or more, is reported by only about 23% of the population. And genuine, spontaneous, regular lucid dreaming, occurring reliably without any technique or training, appears to be quite rare, perhaps one in several hundred or thousand people. The ability seems to be unevenly distributed, and researchers are beginning to understand why. It may have as much to do with the structure of the brain as with any technique or practice. Brain imaging studies have shown that lucid dreamers tend to have a larger and more active prefrontal cortex, the region associated with self-awareness, decision-making, and metacognition. In non-lucid REM sleep, the prefrontal cortex is largely quiet. In lucid dreaming, it becomes significantly more active, which is why the dreamer can suddenly step back and think, "I know this is a dream." Frequent lucid dreamers also show greater functional connectivity between the prefrontal cortex and temporal and parietal areas of the brain. This suggests that lucid dreaming may, in part, be a structural trait, something rooted in brain anatomy, rather than purely a skill acquired through practice. Though practice does appear to help, a major study published in the Journal of Neuroscience in early 2025 analyzed the largest EEG dataset on lucid dreaming ever assembled, pooling data from laboratories in the Netherlands, Germany, Brazil, and the United States. Researchers found that during lucid dreaming, there is significantly increased alpha wave connectivity across the posterior regions of the brain compared to ordinary REM sleep. During the initial moment of becoming lucid, gamma wave activity spikes in the precuneus, a region deep in the parietal lobe associated with self-awareness and visual imagery. The picture that emerges is not of a single lucidity switch being thrown, but of a broad communication across brain regions suddenly becoming more coordinated, as if the whole mind briefly wakes up inside the dream. The moment of becoming lucid in a dream is often triggered by a dream sign, an inconsistency or impossible element that, if noticed and questioned, prompts the recognition of dreaming. Common dream signs include technology that does not work correctly, people who transform or are out of context, physical impossibilities like breathing underwater or walking through walls, and text that shifts or blurs when reread. Many lucid dreaming techniques involve cultivating the habit of noticing these signs during waking life as well, through a practice called reality testing. The idea is that habits of attention developed while awake tend to carry through into the dreaming state, training the sleeping mind to look for the seams in its own construction. One of the most well-established techniques for inducing lucid dreams is the MILD technique, mnemonic induction of lucid dreams, developed by Stephen LaBerge. The technique involves waking in the middle of the night, staying awake for a short period while repeatedly affirming the intention to recognize the next dream, and then returning to sleep while holding that intention as firmly and clearly as possible. Studies have found MILD to be among the most reliably effective of the behavioral techniques, particularly when combined with the wake back to bed approach, waking after 5 or 6 hours of sleep and returning to sleep after a brief period of wakefulness. The brain, already primed for its final and richest REM cycles, is more receptive to the seed of lucid awareness. Meditation practice has been associated with increased lucid dreaming frequency in multiple studies. Research published in 2024, examining meditators across various traditions, found that specific meditation styles, particularly those emphasizing meta-awareness, the monitoring of one's own mental states, were most strongly associated with more frequent lucid dreams. Long-term meditators also show increased gray matter density in prefrontal areas, the same regions that are most active during lucidity. The connection makes intuitive sense. Both meditation and lucid dreaming require the mind to observe itself from a slight distance, to notice what is happening without being fully immersed in it. They are training the same inner capacity through different approaches. Within a lucid dream, the dreamer can sometimes perform actions and even answer questions from the waking world. In a landmark 2021 study published in Current Biology, researchers from 4 different countries demonstrated two-way communication with dreamers during REM sleep. Sleeping participants who had entered lucid states were asked simple questions. Mathematical problems like what is 8 minus 6, through audio or light cues delivered in the laboratory. They responded using the eye signaling method. Across all 4 labs and 36 participants, correct answers were produced on 29 separate occasions, a small but meaningful fraction of the total questions asked. The dreaming mind, it turns out, can hear the world outside, and under the right conditions, it can answer back. Lucid dreamers are sometimes able to move their physical bodies in small ways while dreaming. Research has shown that when lucid dreamers perform rehearsed movements in their dreams, clenching a fist, for example, corresponding but weakened signals can sometimes be detected in the relevant muscle groups. The atonia of REM sleep is not perfect, and it can be partially bypassed by the deliberate metacognitive control that lucid dreaming provides. This observation has led some researchers to investigate whether lucid dream rehearsal of motor skills, athletes practicing a move, musicians rehearsing a passage, might carry over as genuine physical benefit to waking performance. Early evidence is encouraging, though the field is still young and results are preliminary. Nightmares are more than unpleasant experiences. For a significant portion of the population, they are a recurring clinical problem. Nightmare disorder, in which distressing dreams are frequent enough to disrupt sleep and daily functioning, affects an estimated 4 to 8% of the general adult population. Among people with post-traumatic stress disorder, rates are far higher. Some estimates suggest that nightmares affect between 50 and 70% of PTSD sufferers. Nightmares keep people from wanting to sleep, which in turn deepens sleep deprivation, which paradoxically increases the frequency of nightmares. It is a self-reinforcing cycle, and breaking it is one of the more important and under-resourced challenges in clinical sleep medicine. Lucid dreaming has shown early promise as a therapeutic tool for nightmare disorder. The ability to become aware within a nightmare, and then to choose a different response, or to change the dream's direction, fundamentally alters the relationship between the dreamer and their fear. Rather than being helpless within the dream's content, lucid dreamers become active participants. Pilot studies applying lucid dreaming therapy to nightmares in populations including veterans with PTSD and people with narcolepsy have found meaningful reductions in nightmare frequency and severity. In recent work, participants who underwent a combined lucid dreaming and cognitive behavioral approach reported reduced shame and anxiety around sleep itself, something that technique alone rarely achieves. Imagery rehearsal therapy, or IRT, is one of the most evidence-based treatments currently available for nightmare disorder. It involves working with a nightmare's content while awake, changing the ending, introducing a different outcome, rehearsing the revised narrative, so that the new version is what the dreaming mind accesses. It does not require lucid dreaming skills, but it uses the same underlying principle, that the mind, with practice, can influence the content of its own dreams. The technique has strong support from clinical trials and is now recommended by sleep medicine organizations as a first-line treatment for PTSD-related nightmares. False awakenings are a related and somewhat disorienting phenomenon in which a dreamer believes they have woken up, only to realize, sometimes after an extended period of going through morning routines, that they are still dreaming. Some dreamers report multiple false awakenings nested within each other, waking up, only to wake up again, only to wake up once more, before actually returning to waking consciousness. False awakenings tend to occur in the later sleep cycles, during long REM periods, and are more common in people who practice lucid dreaming or who have been sleep deprived. They appear to involve a partial overlap of REM sleep and the neural processes associated with waking, the same partial overlap that underlies sleep paralysis. Sleep paralysis and lucid dreaming occupy adjacent territory in the landscape of consciousness. Both involve a state in which the mind is more awake than the body, where awareness has returned, but the physical systems of waking have not yet fully engaged. Sleep paralysis without awareness can be deeply unsettling. With awareness, with the understanding of what it actually is, it can become a doorway into a lucid dream. Several techniques used by experienced lucid dreamers deliberately begin from a state of sleep paralysis, using the body's temporary stillness as a launching point for a conscious entry into the dream. The very state that troubles some people is, for others, an invitation. You're still here, still awake enough to be listening, still drifting with us through these quiet corridors of the sleeping mind. Take one slow breath. Notice how your body has shifted, how your limbs feel a little heavier, how the room around you has softened slightly. We're exploring consciousness itself tonight, the very thing doing the exploring right now. And we'll keep going, slowly, together. Let's continue. Tibetan Buddhist traditions have practiced what they call dream yoga for centuries, a series of meditative techniques aimed at cultivating awareness during sleep, including the ability to recognize the dream state. In dream yoga, the boundary between waking practice and dream practice is deliberately blurred. Practitioners work to maintain the witnessing awareness that meditation cultivates, carrying it consciously from the waking state across the threshold of sleep. Recent neuroscientific investigations have begun studying long-term dream yoga practitioners using overnight EEG recordings, comparing their dream architecture and lucidity patterns with non-practitioners. Early findings suggest that contemplative sleep practices produce measurable changes in the neural signatures of dreaming, that the tradition may be doing something real. Sleepwalking is a phenomenon that belongs to the opposite end of the consciousness spectrum from lucid dreaming. Where lucid dreaming involves heightened awareness within sleep, sleepwalking involves complex waking behavior, walking, speaking, sometimes performing elaborate tasks, while consciousness remains essentially absent. Sleepwalking occurs during NREM deep sleep, not REM, which means it typically happens in the first third of the night. The sleepwalker is not acting out a dream. They are simply awake enough to move, but not awake enough to be conscious of it. It is a dissociation of the behavioral system from the awareness system, a reminder that the brain's many functions do not always switch off and on together. Out-of-body experiences, the sensation of floating above one's own body and viewing it from a distance, have been reported across history and across every culture. They occur spontaneously during sleep, during near-death events, and occasionally during extreme physical or emotional stress. Neuroscience has located a likely neural correlate for these experiences: the temporoparietal junction, a region at the intersection of the temporal and parietal lobes that integrates sensory information from the body into a coherent sense of self. When activity in this region is disrupted through illness, injury, or the unusual neurological conditions of sleep, the brain's map of where the self is located can briefly come unmoored. The boundary between self and world, it turns out, is not as fixed as it normally seems. Dream content shifts measurably with emotional state, stress levels, and life circumstances. Studies examining dream reports from people undergoing major life transitions, illness, divorce, bereavement, relocation, find that their dreams reflect and process these changes over time. In one documented pattern, people who have recently lost a loved one often dream of them frequently in the weeks immediately following the loss, with those dreams gradually becoming less frequent over months. Whether this represents grief processing, memory consolidation, or simply the brain replaying what it is most preoccupied with, the pattern is consistent enough to suggest that the dreaming mind takes the weight of waking life seriously, even when the dream itself seems to be about something else entirely. Dream incubation, the practice of deliberately directing dream content before sleep, has been reported in ancient cultures and is now being studied in modern laboratories. Ancient Greeks made pilgrimages to temples specifically to sleep within them and receive healing or guiding dreams. Contemporary research has shown that prompts delivered just as a person falls asleep, in the hypnagogic state, can meaningfully influence the content of subsequent dreaming. People primed with a specific image or concept before sleep are more likely to dream about that image. The gate is not as firmly closed as we once thought. The sleeping mind is listening. There is some evidence that creative and problem-solving breakthroughs occur during or just after REM sleep. History offers a number of intriguing accounts. A chemist once reported seeing the structure of a complex molecule in a half-waking state. One celebrated songwriter described hearing a complete melody upon waking, fully formed from a dream. So convinced it must belong to someone else that he spent weeks asking friends whether they recognized it. These are individual accounts, and personal stories are not controlled scientific data. But laboratory studies have found that people are better at solving problems requiring associative, non-linear thinking after periods of REM sleep than after equivalent periods of wakefulness, or NREM sleep. The loosening of rigid thought patterns that characterizes REM may be, among other things, a space for insight. Not all dreams are emotionally negative. While threat-related dreams are the most commonly reported and the most well-remembered, research suggests that positive, neutral, and joyful dreams are in fact quite common. They are simply less often remembered because they carry less emotional salience. People woken from REM periods during laboratory studies report a wider emotional range than most would expect. Curiosity, affection, wonder, amusement. The narrative of the dream as a place of fear and stress may be a sampling bias. We notice and hold on to the unsettling dreams, while the gentler ones dissolve quietly into the morning. Most of the night, even for people who sleep badly, the dreaming mind is simply exploring. Shared dreaming, the idea that two or more people might dream of the same thing or even share a single dream experience, is not supported by current scientific evidence. What does happen, and is well documented, is the incorporation of shared daytime experiences into separately occurring dreams. Partners, close friends, and family members who share significant waking experiences often report dreaming about related content without coordinating. This is consistent with the understanding that dreams draw on recent and emotionally salient memories. The parallel content reflects parallel lives, not a shared interior space. Still, the experience of waking and saying, "I dreamed about that too," carries a strange warmth. A reminder that the people closest to us live inside our sleeping minds as well. Age changes the experience of dreaming in consistent ways. Children's dreams tend to involve more animals and outdoor settings than adult dreams. Adolescents dream frequently about social situations, peer relationships, and performance anxiety. Older adults tend to report dreams that are more past-focused and emotionally complex, often incorporating figures from earlier life stages. The emotional tone of dreams also tends to shift across adulthood. Research suggests that people in their 50s and 60s often report more positive and emotionally resolved dream content than younger adults. As with waking life, the relationship to one's inner world deepens and, for many, gradually softens with time. Halfway through tonight's journey, something is becoming clear. Dreams are not noise in the signal. They are not the brain randomly misfiring or idly replaying the day. They are evidence of a mind that is always at work, sorting, healing, rehearsing, creating, connecting. Whether you remember yours or not, whether they are pleasant or unsettling, your dreaming mind has been doing this faithfully every night of your life, since before you were born. And right now, as you rest here in the quiet, it is already beginning to prepare for what it will create tonight. Whatever it makes will be yours. And it will be, in its own way, extraordinary. And here, at the halfway point, let something settle. The memory you believe most strongly is actually reconstructed each time you recall it. Every night, your brain is quietly rewriting itself, editing, softening, reorganizing the archive of your life. Sleep is not the pause between the days. In a very real sense, it is the editing room where the story of who you are is slowly, carefully revised. Right now, in this moment, that revision is beginning. You don't need to direct it. You don't need to hold any specific thought or memory. You only need to let it happen. And it already is. Now we continue the journey. The smell in a dream comes from the brain, not the nose. All the sensory richness of dreaming, the textures, the sounds, the light, is generated entirely by neural activity, without any external stimulus. The visual cortex receives no signal from the eyes. The auditory cortex receives no signal from the ears. And yet the brain recreates a world that feels as detailed and immersive as waking reality. This is, in a quiet way, one of the most extraordinary things about consciousness. The mind does not need the world in order to experience it. It carries its own world inside, and every night, it lets itself live there. The language centers of the brain behave strangely during dreaming. People speak in their dreams, understand speech, read words, and yet, when examined closely, the text in a dream is often unstable. Words shift when reread. Signs say different things the second time. Researchers have used this instability as a reliable reality test. In a dream, written language tends to be inconsistent because the brain's language processing regions are not being driven by the regular pattern of visual input. The words on the wall of the dream are not words. They are the brain's best approximation of what words are supposed to look like, generated from memory rather than perception. And memory, it turns out, is less precise than we tend to think. During REM sleep, the brain suppresses a chemical called serotonin almost entirely. Serotonin plays a role in emotional stability and the regulation of mood during waking life. Its near absence during dreaming may be one reason why dream emotions feel so unconstrained. Why grief in a dream can be absolute. Why joy can be overwhelming. Why fear can be total. The dream does not moderate its feelings through the usual neurochemical channels. It experiences them at full amplitude. This might be discomforting, but it is also, researchers suggest, part of what makes dreaming therapeutically valuable. The emotional intensity of dreams, even uncomfortable dreams, may be exactly what makes them useful to the healing process. The hippocampus, the brain structure most responsible for forming new memories, is highly active during REM sleep. This is the same structure that plays a central role in spatial navigation and episodic memory encoding while awake. During REM, the hippocampus appears to replay recent experiences at a compressed and somewhat altered rate, reactivating the neural patterns associated with waking events and gradually transferring information to longer-term cortical storage. Dreams, in this framework, may be the conscious byproduct of this replay, the brain's attempt to build a narrative around the fragments it is moving through. The story of the dream and the work of memory are not separate things. They are the same process, glimpsed from the inside. Research published in 2025 used a technique called multivariate pattern analysis to decode what audiobook content participants had listened to before sleep, purely from the patterns of brain activity during their REM sleep. Blind raters who read the participants' morning dream reports were able to correctly identify which of two very different audiobooks had been listened to, at a rate better than chance. This study added to a growing body of evidence that sleep genuinely processes the specific content of pre-sleep experience, not just its emotional tone, but its concrete subject matter. What you bring to sleep, the brain does something with. It is listening more carefully than it lets on. The phenomenon of déjà vu, the eerie sense of having experienced something before, may have a partial connection to dreaming. One hypothesis is that certain fragments of unremembered dreams, stored weakly in memory, can be triggered by waking scenes that share some feature of the dream. The waking moment feels strangely familiar because something like it has been rehearsed internally, without conscious awareness. This hypothesis remains contested, and déjà vu likely has multiple causes. But it gestures towards something genuinely interesting: that the boundary between the remembered and the forgotten is more porous than it seems, and that the dream world leaves traces in us that we cannot always find or name. Lucid dreaming shares certain neural signatures with altered states studied in consciousness research. Research comparing the brain activity of lucid dreamers with other expanded states of awareness has found overlapping patterns, particularly in areas involving self-awareness, perception, and shifts in the default mode network's dominance. This comparison suggests that the brain has more than one path to states of altered self-perception, and that the sleeping mind can arrive, on its own, through its own biology, at territory that waking consciousness rarely visits. The dream is not a pale echo of experience. It is its own category. Not all people dream in the same way, and not all of those differences can be explained by circumstance or habit. Research has found that people with higher general creativity tend to report more vivid and unusual dreams. People with stronger visual memory tend to report more visually detailed dreams. People with higher emotional sensitivity tend to experience more emotionally complex dreaming. These correlations suggest that the dream is shaped by the particular architecture of the waking mind that generates it. That who you are while awake is, in some deep way, who you are while dreaming. The dream does not come from somewhere else. It comes from you. The term oneiromancy refers to the practice of predicting the future from dreams. It was practiced seriously in ancient Mesopotamia, Egypt, Greece, and Rome, and has appeared in virtually every culture that has developed written language. Ancient Egyptians developed formal systems for classifying and interpreting dream content. Whatever one makes of prediction itself, the universality of the belief that dreams carry information worth attending to suggests something genuine, that human beings across cultures and centuries have recognized intuitively that the dreaming mind is doing something meaningful. Science has now replaced prophecy with neuroscience, but the underlying impulse to listen carefully to what the sleeping mind has to say remains. Some research suggests that the brain uses brief bursts of high-frequency neural activity during NREM sleep, called sleep spindles, to protect the dreaming brain from being awakened by external noise. When a sound occurs during sleep, the brain can generate a sleep spindle in response, essentially suppressing the signal before it reaches consciousness. People who generate more sleep spindles tend to sleep more deeply in noisy environments. The sleeping mind, even when seemingly unconscious, is quietly monitoring the world outside and actively deciding what to let through. It is a guardian, standing watch at the border of awareness. There is evidence that the themes of your waking worries shape the tone of your dreams more than the specific events of the day. Studies comparing dream content with pre-sleep mood, current life stresses, and overall psychological well-being consistently find that diffuse emotional states, anxiety, sadness, a sense of unresolved tension, generate dream environments saturated with those feelings, often without directly representing the source of the feeling. A person anxious about their work may not dream of their work. They may dream of being lost, or pursued, or unable to speak. The dream translates feeling into symbol, and that translation is imperfect, elliptical, and sometimes strange, but the feeling itself passes through intact. Color in dreams is more variable than most people realize. Surveys conducted in the mid-20th century found that a significant percentage of people reported dreaming in black and white. More recent research suggests this was likely influenced by the fact that those respondents had grown up watching black and white television. Studies of younger generations, who grew up with color media, show much higher rates of color dreaming. This finding is genuinely interesting. It suggests that the visual style of dreaming is partly calibrated to the visual environment of waking life. The brain learns from the colors it sees. And then, in the dark, it recreates them. The first recorded description of a lucid dream is generally attributed to Aristotle, writing in the 4th century BCE, who noted in his work on dreams that often when one is asleep, there is something in consciousness which declares that what then presents itself is but a dream. This casual observation, embedded in a philosophical text, not a scientific one, contains the essential structure of lucidity, awareness of the dream state while remaining within it. More than 2,000 years passed between Aristotle's observation and its scientific verification. The question, he noticed, has been sitting quietly at the edge of human understanding for most of recorded history. Yoga Nidra, a contemplative practice often translated as yogic sleep, occupies a state similar to the hypnagogic zone, deliberately sustained between waking and sleeping. Practitioners remain conscious while the body enters the physiological state of sleep, maintaining a thread of witnessing awareness through the transition. Recent neuroscientific investigation has begun examining what the brain looks like during advanced Yoga Nidra practice, finding activity patterns that are distinct from both ordinary sleep and ordinary meditation. These practices, developed within contemplative traditions over centuries, appear to be genuine and distinctive states of consciousness, not simply relaxation, and not simply sleep. By now, the science is pointing in a consistent direction. Dreams are not random noise. They are part of the brain's most fundamental processes of memory, emotion, learning, and self-repair. The sleeping mind is not absent. It is present in a different way, less filtered, less defended, less constrained by the practical demands of waking life. And within that less defended space, it does things it cannot do while awake, makes connections across memories that logic would keep separate, processes feelings that the day cannot contain, and sometimes, if the conditions are right, becomes aware of itself in the act of dreaming. The question is not only why we dream. The question may be what we lose when we don't. REM sleep disruption has been associated in multiple studies with increased emotional reactivity. When people are deprived of REM sleep specifically, even while their total sleep time is preserved, they show heightened responses to emotional stimuli the following day, particularly to negative or threatening content. Brain imaging confirms that the amygdala responds more intensely to emotional faces and scenes after REM deprivation. The restorative function of dreaming appears to include a nightly calibration of the emotional system, a resetting of the sensitivity on the brain's threat detection and distress response circuits. Without it, the waking world simply feels a little louder, a little sharper, a little more difficult to bear. Some people with certain neurological conditions do not experience the muscle atonia of REM sleep. In a condition called REM, sleep behavior disorder, the brain's mechanism for paralyzing the body during dreaming fails, and the person physically acts out their dreams, sometimes forcefully, often without any awareness of doing so. This condition, which is more common in older adults and has been linked to early signs of certain neurodegenerative diseases, offers a striking window into the dream. The body, freed from its restraint, reveals what the dreaming mind is experiencing. People with this condition have been found to be defending themselves, fleeing, or moving through vivid scenarios, all while deeply, genuinely asleep. The practice of keeping a dream journal is used not only to improve dream recall, but as a form of psychological and creative exploration. Many artists, writers, and thinkers across history have maintained detailed dream diaries, finding in the imagery of their sleeping minds material that waking thought alone could not produce. The surrealist art movement of the early 20th century deliberately drew on the loose associative logic of the dreaming mind. Whether or not dreams are prophetic or symbolic in the traditional sense, they offer something genuinely rare: access to a part of the mind that does not follow the rules of waking thought. That access, for some, has proven generative beyond measure. People who are born deaf and use sign language as their primary language have been found to dream in sign language. The content of the dream is shaped by the communication system the dreaming brain knows best. This remarkable finding reinforces the broader principle that dreams are not a separate realm with its own fixed language. They are generated by the brain that produces them, using the materials that brain has available. Dreaming is personal in a very deep sense. It draws on your specific nervous system, your specific history, your specific sensory and linguistic world. No one else could have your dreams. They are yours in the most fundamental way imaginable. Some researchers have proposed that dreaming may function as a form of offline social simulation, a practice space for navigating complex human relationships. Dream content is heavily populated with other people: friends, family members, strangers, threatening figures, beloved ones. The interactions that play out in dreams often rehearse precisely the kinds of socially and emotionally challenging situations that cause the most difficulty in waking life. If this simulation theory is correct, then the dream is not merely an emotional processing tool, but a social one. A space in which the brain practices being human among other humans, experimenting with responses and outcomes that waking life does not allow. The dreaming mind may be, in part, a very private social laboratory. The question of whether animals experience dreams in a subjectively rich way remains philosophically open, even though the neurophysiology of REM sleep is remarkably conserved across mammals. We can measure the brain activity. We can observe the behaviors. We cannot ask the animal what it experienced. But watching a dog twitch, whimper, and move its paws during what is clearly a REM sleep episode, it is difficult not to wonder about the world it is inhabiting in that moment. Science requires caution about attributing subjective experience without evidence. And wonder does not require scientific permission. Both can exist at the same time. A careful uncertainty alongside a quiet, intuitive sense that we are not the only ones who dream. Sleep and dreaming are more closely connected to waking creativity than most research tends to acknowledge. Studies into creative cognition have proposed that dreaming represents a mode of thinking that is looser, more associative, and less constrained by habitual patterns than waking thought. Researchers have documented cases of scientific problems solved, artistic visions accessed, and creative blockages released through the particular quality of thinking that dreaming and dream-adjacent states make available. If this is true, and there is good reason to believe it is, then protecting sleep is not just a health decision. It is a decision about how much of your creative capacity you are willing to leave dormant. Lucid dreaming can produce measurable physical changes. Research has shown that when lucid dreamers perform aerobic activities within a dream, jogging, climbing, there are corresponding increases in heart rate and respiration rate in the sleeping body. The dream activity does not fully simulate waking physical exertion, but it produces real physiological changes that go beyond the ordinary fluctuations of REM sleep. This suggests that the dreaming mind, in lucid states, can communicate specific intentions to the body's autonomic systems in ways that go beyond what occurs in ordinary dreaming. The body responds, even slightly, to what the dreaming mind decides to do. Virtual reality and lucid dreaming have recently been brought into the same experimental space. A 2025 study explored whether a shared virtual reality experience, designed to foster a sense of interconnectedness, could be carried into a subsequent lucid dreaming state. Participants who entered lucid dreams following the VR experience reported content related to that experience at measurably higher rates than controls. The researchers proposed that combining pre-sleep immersive experiences with lucid dreaming induction could become a tool for therapeutic exploration and for cultivating pro-social emotional states. A method that exists, for now, at the thoughtful edge of the field, but one whose first results are genuinely intriguing. And here, as tonight's journey approaches its final phase, something has become clear. The question we began with, what happens when we dream, and what is a lucid dream, has been answered, though not simply. The dreaming brain is not a passive cinema playing random films. It is an active, organized, purposeful system doing work that waking cannot do. And within the dream, the rarest and most extraordinary possibility exists. That awareness can wake up inside sleep, that consciousness can find itself in the middle of its own construction and know it. That knowing is something science can now measure and study. And it is still, even now, quietly remarkable. You might be feeling tired now. That's perfectly fine. Sleep doesn't come when you try to sleep. It comes when you stop trying. And this is exactly that moment. Your body is not waiting for permission. It already knows how to do this. The rhythm of sleep is older than memory, older than language, older than everything you have ever been taught. You don't have to guide it, or manage it, or understand it. You only have to let go of the watching, and let the night do what the night knows how to do. We're almost there now. You have been dreaming your whole life. Every night of your life, without exception. The sleeping brain has been constructing inner worlds. You remember only a fraction of them, a handful of images, an emotion, sometimes nothing at all. But they happened, all of them, and something in you, even now, carries the shape of what they left behind. Dreams do not require memory to matter. They do their work whether you remember them or not. The dreaming mind does not know the difference between what happened and what it imagined. At the level of neural activation, a vividly imagined scene and a genuinely experienced one can look remarkably similar. This is a feature, not a flaw. The brain's capacity to simulate, to generate experience internally, is one of the most powerful things it does. What we call imagination and what we call memory are not opposites. They are neighboring processes, drawing on the same materials, built from the same source. A nightmare is the dreaming mind doing something hard. It is not a malfunction. It is the sleeping brain attempting to process something it finds threatening or unresolved, something with emotional weight that the daytime mind could not fully contain. The nightmare is a service, imperfect and uncomfortable. When it recurs, it is the brain returning to something important. When it finally resolves, when the difficult dream simply stops, something has usually shifted. Not always in ways we can name, but something has been worked through. Some people, when they become lucid in a dream, choose not to control or redirect it. They simply observe. They walk through the world the dreaming mind has constructed, noticing its details, letting its story continue without intervention. These dreamers often report a quality of experience they describe as deeply peaceful, a kind of pure witnessing, without agenda, without judgment. They are awake inside their own sleep, and they find, in that state, that what the mind creates on its own, without direction, is often stranger and more beautiful than anything they would have chosen for themselves. The transition between waking and sleeping happens gradually and unevenly. Different parts of the brain move at different speeds. Some neural systems fall asleep before others. In the twilight of hypnagogia, it is possible to be simultaneously in two states. One system already dreaming, another still alert enough to witness it. This partial overlap is where creativity often lives, where unusual solutions surface, where the logic of waking loosens just enough to let something new through. Edison's steel balls. Scientists dozing over their work. The liminal zone is not just a curiosity of sleep physiology. It may be the mind's most generative hour. People who go blind later in life tend to retain visual dreaming for years. The visual cortex, once trained by decades of seeing, does not simply forget. It continues to generate images, drawing on stored visual memory. For a long time after the eyes have stopped providing input, this is a quiet testimony to the persistence of neural patterns, to how much the brain holds, long after the original experience has ended. What we have seen, we do not entirely lose. The images live on somewhere, waiting for the conditions in which the brain will use them again. The act of becoming lucid in a dream is, in the most literal sense, a moment of self-awareness. It is consciousness becoming aware of itself in real time, not in the abstract, philosophical sense, but concretely. A mind recognizing that it is a mind, even while that mind is asleep. This is unusual. Consciousness does not often catch itself in the act of existing, but in the suspended, particular space of the lucid dream. That catching occurs, and people who experience it often describe it as one of the most striking moments of their lives. Not because of what they did with it, simply because of what it felt like to be suddenly, clearly, aware. Dreams sometimes feature the faces of strangers who, neuroscientists suggest, are not truly strangers. The human brain is extraordinarily good at storing faces. It has been doing so since infancy, absorbing thousands of faces seen in passing, on screens, in crowds. These stored images become material for the dreaming mind to draw on when it needs to populate a scene. The strangers in a dream may be composites, or distorted versions, or faces glimpsed only once in a lifetime. They have been waiting quietly in memory's deeper shelves until the dreaming brain needed them. Every face in a dream has, in some form, been seen before. The length of a dream, as experienced within the dream, does not correspond reliably to the actual duration of the REM period. Dreams that seem to span an entire day may correspond to only a few minutes of sleep. Some researchers believe this discrepancy arises from how the brain constructs the dream narrative, building the sense of duration in ways that do not map neatly onto clock time. Time in the dream is not measured. It is felt and feeling. The brain has always known, is not bound by the clock. Shared dream imagery across cultures. The falling dream, the flight dream, the chase dream, suggests that certain features of the dreaming brain are universal. These themes are not culturally transmitted. They arise independently in populations with no historical contact, in children who have not yet had time to absorb cultural templates. They appear to be generated by the structure of the human brain itself, by its fear systems, its embodiment, its relationship to gravity and movement. We all dream of falling because we all have a body that knows what falling means. Some parts of the inner world are simply human. People who practice lucid dreaming over time often report a changed relationship to fear, not only in their dreams, but in waking life. The experience of encountering a threatening figure in a dream and choosing to stop, to turn around, to approach with curiosity rather than panic, appears to translate, for some, into a similar shift in waking life responses to anxiety. The research is not yet definitive, but the hypothesis makes sense. When you learn, in the most visceral possible environment, that fear can be met rather than fled from, that knowledge does not stay inside the dream. It comes home with you. The sleeping brain never fully stops monitoring the outside world. Even in deep sleep, the auditory system remains partially active, able to detect and respond to significant sounds. Your own name, a baby's cry, the specific sound pattern associated with something that needs attention. The brain filters rather than blocks. It decides, moment by moment, what is important enough to allow through. This is why a parent can sleep through traffic and sirens but wake immediately at the quiet sound of their child's cry from another room. The sleeping mind is selective, not absent. It is choosing, from within its dreaming depths, what it pays attention to. Dreams feel real because the brain does not generate a "this is fiction" signal during REM sleep. The circuits that would normally label an experience as imaginary or remembered, rather than presently happening, are not active in the same way during dreaming. The dream does not announce itself as a dream. It simply occurs, with the same sensory immediacy that waking experience carries. And this is what makes the moment of lucidity so striking. The moment you say, "This is a dream inside a dream," you are doing something the brain does not naturally do in that state. You are overriding its default. You are introducing a perspective that was not supposed to be there. And in that moment, something remarkable becomes possible. One of the most persistent mysteries in consciousness research is the question of why subjective experience, the sense of what it is like to see red, or feel warmth, or be afraid, cannot be fully explained by describing neural activity alone. Dreams sit at the heart of this question. In the dream, there is no external world being perceived. No light is entering the eyes. No sound is vibrating the eardrums. And yet the experience is full, real, immediate. The color is red. The warmth is warm. The fear is entirely fear. The brain is generating, from within itself alone, the full texture of conscious experience. That is not a small thing. The brain that dreams is the same brain that loves, that creates, that remembers, that worries, that hopes. There is no separate dreaming mind apart from the waking mind. It is the same system, operating under different conditions, with different chemicals, different rhythms, different rules, but the same you. The dreaming self is not a stranger. It is simply a quieter, less defended, less edited version of the same person who moves through the day. And occasionally, when everything aligns, that person looks around the landscape they have created and thinks, "I know this place. I made this. And I am here. And I am aware." Dreaming, at its quietest level, may be a form of self-care. The brain devotes hours of each night, hours that cannot be cut without consequence, to the particular kind of processing that only dreaming allows. It insists on this time. When deprived of it, it attempts to reclaim it. After a night without adequate REM sleep, the next night's REM period expands, as if compensating for what was missed. This is called REM rebound. It is the brain's way of saying, "This matters. I will not skip it indefinitely. Whatever else you give up, you cannot take this from me." The dream is not a luxury. It is the brain protecting itself. There is something profoundly private about dreaming. Of all the forms of human experience, the dream may be the most completely interior. No one else has access to it. It cannot be shared in its full form, only described afterward, imperfectly, in words that never quite capture what the dream itself contained. This privacy is not a limitation. It is the nature of what the dream is. It is experience that belongs entirely to the person having it, not recorded, not documented, not available for anyone else to examine. In a world where so much of inner life is visible or legible, the dream remains unreachable. It is yours entirely. And when it fades each morning, it takes that privacy with it. Lucid dreamers who are skilled enough to explore the dream world with some stability often describe the quality of the experience in language that sounds less like a description of sleep and more like a description of a place. They speak of walking through architecture that shifts, of light that has no source, of conversations with figures who seem to know things the dreamer does not. Whether these reports reflect genuine complexity in the brain's dream generation processes, or the particular way language shapes the memory of experience, they point to something. The dreaming mind, at its most active and most aware, is capable of generating something that feels, while it is happening, like more than a dream. What that more is, science is still patiently working to say. Sleep is not a passive state. The word sleep might suggest stillness, withdrawal, a dimming of the lights. But the evidence from decades of research points towards something more like a second life, equally complex, equally purposeful, equally necessary as the one lived in daylight. The brain in sleep is not waiting for morning. It is working. It is doing the things that cannot be done while conscious and mobile and engaged with the world. And the dream is the mind's way of knowing that it is doing them. A glimpse, however strange and incomplete, of the self in the middle of its own repair. Memory, emotion, creativity, connection, self-awareness. The list of what dreaming appears to serve is long and still growing. And alongside all of it, there remains the possibility that dreams mean something else entirely, something that science is not yet equipped to address, something that belongs to the dreamer alone and resists translation into data. The scientists who study dreaming most carefully tend to be the ones most comfortable saying, "We do not know everything." And the dreamers who have spent years attending carefully to their own inner lives tend to have a quiet certainty that whatever dreams are, they are not nothing. Both are right. Tonight, as you rest here, your brain is preparing for its own night's work. The systems that generate dreams are readying themselves. Memory traces from today are already being flagged for processing. Emotional residue from the week is waiting in the queue. And somewhere in the architecture of your resting mind, the particular world that tonight's dream will construct is already in some dim and preliminary way, taking shape. You won't remember most of it, but it will happen. And the morning you wake to will be, in ways you may never fully trace, shaped by what the sleeping mind did tonight. There is a quality to some dreams, not the frightening ones, not the unusual ones, but the quiet ones. A quality of profound okayness. A dream in which the world is simply as it is, and you are in it, and nothing needs to be different. These dreams are the ones least likely to be remembered, because they carry no urgency, no unfinished business. They leave no residue in the morning because there is nothing for memory to latch onto. They are, in every measurable sense, the least remarkable dreams. And yet the feeling that lingers from them, the sense of having rested somewhere safe and still, is the most restful feeling that sleep produces. The science of dreaming is young. The tools are improving. The questions are deepening. In recent years alone, researchers have learned new things about the electrical signatures of lucid dreaming, the influence of pre-sleep experience on dream content, the potential therapeutic value of lucid dreaming for trauma, and the neural architecture of people who dream most vividly. Each answer opens more questions. The territory of the sleeping mind is vast, and the maps are still being drawn. There is likely more to discover in the next 20 years of dream research than was discovered in the entire century before. We are, in the most honest scientific sense, only beginning to understand what happens when we close our eyes. Some nights, just before the final edge of sleep, there is a moment, a brief stillness between the last coherent thought and the first formless image of the dream. A pause in which awareness is still present but already beginning to soften, to loosen its grip on the specifics of who and where and when. This moment, the one you are perhaps approaching right now, is the threshold. It has no official name in sleep science, though researchers study the neural states it corresponds to. Every human being who has ever slept has passed through it, countless thousands of times, without ceremony, without knowing what it is, without needing to. And here, at the last fact of tonight's journey, the answer is not a fact at all. It is a feeling, the feeling of lying quietly in the dark, knowing that the sleeping mind is a place worth going, that whatever it creates tonight, whatever the dreaming brain assembles from the materials of memory and emotion and the deep logic of your own inner life, it is not random. It is not wasted. It belongs to you, and it is doing something important, and you do not need to understand it in order to trust it. The science we have traveled through tonight points, in the end, towards something that science alone cannot say, that the dream is, perhaps, one of the places where you are most completely yourself. And so, our quiet journey through the science of dreams comes gently to a close. We traveled from that first hovering edge of hypnagogia, where images form at the threshold of sleep, to the structured architecture of REM, with its extraordinary activation and its protective stillness. We passed through the territory of false awakenings and the borderlands of sleep paralysis, and arrived at last at the rare, illuminated state of lucid dreaming, where a mind in deep REM sleep sends a prearranged signal to a laboratory waiting in the waking world, bridging two realities across a single sequence of eye movements. From a sleeping rat replaying its path through a maze, to a dreamer answering a math question from within a dream, we glimpsed how many different minds are doing something in the night that science is only beginning to describe. And we saw that the dream is not the absence of thinking. It may be, in its own quiet way, the mind's deepest and most honest work. Dreaming reminds us that the mind does not stop when the world goes dark. It simply turns inward, toward its own unfinished business, toward the feelings that did not fully resolve, toward the connections waiting to be made. Without the dream, the day cannot be fully put to rest. With it, the night becomes something more than a pause. It becomes a conversation, private, wordless, and entirely your own. In these final minutes, take the deepest breath you can, as deep as possible. Think about unity. Every dreamer who has ever lived, every sleeping child, every exhausted adult, every person who has ever, just for a moment, known they were dreaming. All of them carried this same quiet interior world. All of them passed through the same threshold, into the same darkness. You are part of that, not separate from it. A link in the long chain of sleepers. Let your entire being dissolve into the space between waking and dreaming, where thought becomes image, where memory becomes story, where the self, briefly, forgets that it has edges. Prepare for deep sleep. No boundaries left. Only peace. If this gentle exploration of dreams and the sleeping mind helped you relax or begin to drift tonight, a quiet like or subscribe could help another restless soul find their way here too. It only takes a moment, and it means everything to those still searching for a peaceful place to land. But there's no need to do anything now. Nothing at all. You've traveled far tonight, further than the distance between waking and sleep. You can allow these thoughts of dreaming to fade now, like the last image before waking dissolves. Present for a moment, then simply part of everything, leaving only a soft, unheld calm. Let your breathing deepen. Let your body feel heavier, as if the gentle weight of the night itself has settled around you and is simply holding you. If sleep comes, let it carry you the way a dream begins, not with a decision, not with an effort, but with a quiet softening, until the edges are gone and you are simply somewhere else. If your eyes are still open, the next video is waiting for you, ready to continue the journey. But if they're closed, stay there. Stay in the darkness that feels safe and warm. Tomorrow, the dreaming mind will still be there, still working, still tending to what it tends to. But tonight belongs to stillness. Rest well, sleepy soul. And remember, somewhere in the dark behind your eyes, something beautiful is already beginning. Good night.
you